Good morning, everybody. This is Ali Hirji. You all know me as the lead from the AI Hub, as well as the Durham College Center for Cybersecurity. They say that doubt is a very uncomfortable condition, but certainty is a ridiculous one. If you doubt something's happening online, if you doubt that somebody is going through something, yes, it's an uncomfortable position. But being certain that or ignoring something with certainty, that's even worse. If something's going wrong, you need to ask. Today's session is important for all of us here in the cybersecurity community because it focuses on what are some of the social, ethical, psychological, political implications of the online environments that we build and that we promote, especially during this time of COVID-19, where more and more digital engagement is happening and more interaction is happening behind closed doors, one to many. Today, it's both an honor and a very important responsibility that I have on my shoulders on behalf of the advisory committee, but on behalf of my college, to have a discussion with Carol Todd, who leads the Amanda Todd Legacy Foundation. I'm sure all of you who are tuning in, we have over 100 people now, you all know very well the lived experience that Carol Todd can speak to. Carol, once again, thank you for taking the time and joining us so early in the morning to give us your perspective. Before we begin, always welcome. Before we begin, I want to turn it to Medha Saraiya. She is the CEO of ConnexHealth, a partner to Durham College, a sponsor of this session. She's going to say some opening comments for the first 2 minutes and introduce our speaker as well as the other senator that we're waiting on. Medha, I'll give you 2 minutes for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Ali. As Ali mentioned, this session is very important to all of us and to me personally. Not only as a healthcare professional who helps people with mental health and who helps individuals deal with some of the complexities, but also as a mother of a teenager who I'm concerned about, who I might have to look out for, and what are the things I have to look out for. So it's a personal session that I'm very intrigued by and that I want to learn from. So let's not wait anymore. Let me introduce Carol Todd. Carol Todd is the founder of the Amanda Todd Legacy Society, committed to fighting cyber abuse. She advocates for safe digital engagement and is committed to enhanced mental health services for our youth. Our other guest speaker who is supposed to join today is Senator Selma. Senator Selma is the Deputy Chair of the Standing Committee on Human Rights and a member of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Trade, as well as a Standing Committee on National Finances. She's committed on issues affecting women and youth, having proposed several recognized studies in Human Rights Committee, one on women engagement in Afghanistan, another on cyberbullying of children under the United Nations Convention of Rights of the Children, as well as the Syrian refugee resettlement in Canada. So Ali, over to you, and I'm super excited to learning more about today's session.
Thank you so much, Medha. Before we begin, I do see that Senator Salma has joined. If you can just bear with me for a couple of seconds while I look her up here. She is listed as an attendee by the looks of it. And let me see if I can allow her, make her into panelist. And I have Senator Salma. If you can unmute your mic, you have now been added to the session. Good morning, Senator Salma. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Pleasure to have you on board, and thank you for taking the time. I know you have a lot going on. I do appreciate you taking this time, and more importantly, Farouk Nair from Orion, who made sure that all of the connections were made. Farouk is here as well, and I thank all of you for your support and dedication. Carol, I'm going to jump right into the session and begin.
Okay.
I already have questions coming into me via WhatsApp, and I will make sure that all these questions get channeled to you as well as Senator Salma. Carol, the question that I have is, how do you know, or how can you tell what is an episode where somebody is experiencing some form of violence online? A, can you talk to us about what those signs are, but B, who are the vulnerable folks when it comes to experiencing violence online? Carol?
I think the signs of someone
experiencing some violence online, whether it's scams or cyber talk or whatever, is that change in behavior, that increase you create. And so my experiences with children, that's my background, is that you see a baseline, and then you see the changes in behavior. Someone isn't eating the same, someone isn't sleeping the same, they're agitated, they're anxious, right? And earlier you talked about, ask somebody, but there's a big responsibility in making sure that we report these behaviors that you're experiencing. Or if you're someone who has a friend who's experiencing, they've shared it, right? It's your moral responsibility to make sure that you tell someone, or you convince your friend to expand on their story and get some support, because we know now, and my experience is that what you experience online, that's truly negative and truly hurtful, because everything, we can't put them into silos where it's this little experience, oh, it's nothing, just wash it away, right? Because they can expand and blow up and create so much fear and anxiety and hinder your day-to-day living, that it truly encompasses you, right? So there's always that, you need that support at the end game. That's one of your actions. You said you wanted actions, and we're going to make a list of actions that are needed.
And the ability to observe and study, or at least pay attention to those signs and knowing what those signs are, I guess is our first action item. Is that if you have individuals who are engaging online, you've got children, you've got seniors, you've got other vulnerable groups, it is important to observe how they are from the regular state that they've been in when they're interacting with you. Sudden changes in behavior, like you mentioned. Senator Salma, I'd like to weave you into this conversation right now, because Carol spoke about these signs and these observations. And I'm sure with your experience, not just in the Canadian context, but across the global South, you've obviously noticed some of these observations. I'd like to get your perspective on what have you seen when it comes to these telltale signs that someone's experiencing something extremely negative online. Senator Salma?
Thank you. Well, what we found when we did this study is that a lot of people didn't recognize the signs, and especially children. They have one persona outside and another when they come home. And with the study that we did, we ended up publishing 2 guidebooks, one for parents and one for children, because we found that there were things that I learned, and I thought, I'm aware of what's happening. I have 2 daughters at home, but it was a whole new world when we looked at cyberbullying. And it was a few incidents that I heard about which motivated me to do this study. And at the onset, I have to say, I thank you for doing this, because the study we did was 2011 and 12, but the world has changed since then. The phones are quicker, you can do all kinds of things with your phones and your computers. And I was thinking that when we do go back, I would like to revisit the study and see what has changed, what we can do. So the signs are there. Some parents will recognize them, some don't. I'm sure we all know, the children, when they're in school with their friends, it's, they have a different personality. They come home and they try and cover up. So as a parent, having an eagle eye and keeping an eye on what's happening. And the reference I gave, and I remember at that study, was that you won't give your children the key to a car and say, okay, go drive. You'll teach them. But yet in our society, we have handed smartphones and computers and everything to our children without any kind of boundaries being set, which is very difficult to set nowadays. And this study, when I traveled in Europe, I remember the foreign minister of Serbia asked for the study. We've gone back to the Senate, and we continue to print the guidebooks that we had, because parents and students, needed to be given those, and the teachers would ask for them too.
Thank you, Senator Salma. Often when a lot of us who have a technical kind of acumen, or just focus on the technicalities, I remember hearing a lot of people saying, when I discuss this topic, that, oh, you know what, we're all in the same boat. Everybody can be, can face some sort of unwarranted circumstances online. And that line, we're all in the same boat, kind of really struck me negatively. I don't think we're all in the same boat. We're definitely in the same ocean. Some folks have luxury yachts and some folks are on rafts. And Carol, I want to come back to you to talk about who are some of the most vulnerable folks online, and why has it taken us so long to recognize this, if at all that we have recognized it fully? Carol?
I think we're all vulnerable, but there are some that are more vulnerable. And so you talk about individuals with left and right brains, and some people are just born more sensitive. And so I have my daughter Amanda, and I have a son, and they could not be so polar opposite. And I once asked him about bullying, cyberbullying, and he told me he could just like ignore it. And there's others that just can't ignore it, and they keep watching what's coming on their screen, and it absorbs them and it affects them. And so we have to talk about resiliency, and we have to talk about knowledge. And so when we see parents, right, we have to make sure that they have the toolkit for their children. And the toolkit is also good for seniors, which are the children's grandparents, right? And so it encompasses everybody, but everybody's it may be in different silos of learning. And I always tell the kids, the young people, right? Your parents are asking you not because they're spying on you or creeping on you. Their job when you were born was to keep you safe, and keep you safe forever. So you might be 27, and your parents will still ask you, how is your day? And that's why I always encourage that you keep the conversations open. And as Senator Selma was saying, we don't hand the car keys to our children when they turn 16 and say, just go drive. We give them lessons, right? We give them a guidebook. We tell them what to do if you get a flat tire, this is what you do. If your car won't start, this is what you do. It's the same thing, and I use the analogy of a swimming pool, like 10 feet. And we don't just throw our kids into the swimming pool and say, swim. We give them lessons. And more now, as technology has advanced, right? That smartphone in the hands of children. And I just read a study where 80% or 90% of all children, so we can average, say the child is from 2 years old all the way up to 17, 80 to 90% of them have access to technology to use.
Yep.
And that is great. Technology is wonderful. I'm an educator, right? But when we don't put the guidelines and the rules in for use of these devices, that becomes the dangerous situation. That phone, that tablet in the hands of our children is more powerful than that big honking computer we used to have on our desk 15 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's a computer in your pocket. So we're allowing our children to have these devices and move around with them and have apps and converse with strangers. But as adults, we don't know everything that goes on in the cyber world, and it's our responsibility to learn. And so another action plan is, how do we get that information, the knowledge out to the adults of the world, so they can talk to their kids, their youth, their parents who are the seniors in our society. How do we do that?
It's a great little segue into the question that I wanted to bring to Senator Salma. I know that I'm observing we have over 100 odd people on the line here, and I paid attention that there are folks from National Defense. I have the Dean from Durham College, Debbie McKee-Demchik as well, folks who are at the lead of various organizations that can implement some of these handbooks that can help parents. Senator Salma, what is currently going on from a federal perspective to ensure that every single parent, every single child, every single citizen has some sort of armory and training with regards to online safety?
Well, this was one of the recommendations we made, that we need to have a whole society approach to it. And we were told that the laws that are in place will cover cyberbullying laws. But there's, many aspects to cyberbullying. Is the biggest, for me, the biggest sort of moment was when we realized that we had to educate the educators too, because they didn't know what cyberbullying was. And, now it's, and I remember there was a senator, one of the older senators, and when I said we need to look at cyberbullying, and he said, Senator, but we've already studied bullying. All you do is go into the yard and duck it out. And I said, no, Senator, this is the new frontier of, of bullying. It's like a prison sentence. It doesn't leave you. Wherever you go, you have that device on you. And it's very hard, even as an adult now. I'll say, okay, 2 hours, I'm not looking at my phone, but it's a conscious decision I make. And I find that my daughters are doing the same. We'll put our phones away and we say we're not looking at it. And, talking about bullying, we get bullied too as parliamentarians. If you see some of the messages and the threats that come at us, and I will sometimes, when I tweet something, I will read some of the comments, and my children will take the phone away and they say, don't do that one, because it affects you. And I'm an adult, and I, used to hearing negative events, whether it's about how I look or how I dress or what I said or, what religion I follow. And it impacts you. So think of the young minds, who are developing, how much damage is done to them. So we need to have, like I said, this study was 2011, 2012. Right. Once the Senate resumes, I am going to see that the Human Rights Committee looks at this issue again, because my fear is that while we're here in isolation, while a lot of the kids, the only link that they have with the outside world is their computer or their phone, I think the situation must have gotten worse. I fear, and I'm sure I'm right, that the instances of bullying must have gotten worse during this time.
Senator Salma, thank you so much for that. There are quite a few questions that are coming in, so forgive me if I'm looking around, because I've got a couple of devices here where I'm trying to mix all the questions together and make good use of our time. Senator Salma, you speak with a lot of calm and composure, and you make a fierce point. And I'm reminded of a line that my late grandmother once told me, which she said, you know what, Ali, it's fine to offend someone, just don't oppress them. Someone's offended by your thought, but don't oppress them to the point where they can't say that they don't know something. So I really like that example when you took up the senator on his understanding of bullying. Carol, I saw that you had your hand up.
I do.
Just jump in at any time, Carol.
I do, because I've been listening and I'm writing notes, and we talk about what the senator was saying about bullying and cyberbullying. And I think I had a conversation, I always have this conversation actually, about the word cyberbullying. And I feel that we've overused that word, and it's not really being listened to. And I have, of course, I've been in Ottawa to talk about cyberbullying and online behaviors and all that stuff. And we have to call it what it is. And so I believe in my heart that our criminal code is a bit outdated in the terms of cyber criminality, right? Because cyberbullying is cyber violence, it's cyber harassment, it's cyber abusive behavior. And yes, we protect our children, but what about those adults? What about when you become an adult at 19 years old and you are the victim, you're targeted by whoever's at the other end? And so what constitutes criminal? What constitutes that you can go report to law enforcement and that they will do something about it? Why is it that you have to have the person at the other end inflict something, say something that is a danger to you, like I'm going to kill you, I'm going to find you, why does that constitute instant an instant case opening investigation when ongoing cyber harassment on a day-to-day basis? Because remember what the definition of bullying is ongoing repetitive negative behavior to someone, right? And so we need to look at that, and we need our government to look at it so that we can create something nationally instead of with each province doing their own constitution legislation on cyber abusive behaviors. We need to call it what it is. And it is abusive behaviors that have negative detriments to other people. When you talk about posting, I think that everybody out there needs to know that if we used to write notes, we used to write sticky notes and on my wall, right, and post them, but those are private for us to see. We need to realize that if you are going to take that step and share something out there to the world on social media, there will be negative comments. And south of us, there's the Second Amendment, freedom of speech. But you also have to know how to handle those negative comments and how to just, like a piece of paper, rip it off, tear it, throw it away, and not let it absorb you. And that's part of that resiliency that we talked about before. But our children need to know how to do that, and our parents. But then on the other hand, we have to be careful what we post, right? Because there's always, we've learned to be critical in this society. And as a teacher, we have taught our children 15 years ago how to critically think. So critical thinking is a part of life and a part of learning and a part of education. It's teaching individuals how to use those thoughts, what to share, what not to share, how it follows you, the negative impacts on it. During COVID-19, yes, we've all been isolated. We're all on our technology. Technology has ramped up the use of it. And this was an important time to teach our adults to have conversations with their young people living in their house about how to use technology, what's good about it, what's not good about it. And lots of parents have just given up the 2-hour restriction to using technology, but we need to keep those guidelines. Just because we're all self-isolating doesn't mean that it's a free rein for technology, because those predators are out there. And I'm talking about just predators to kids. There's predators out there preying on people of all ages, whether it's for monetary value or sexual gratification or whatever. They are out there, and those are the things that we need to be more aware of. And the other thing is social emotional learning, when we talk about the education system and what teachers need to learn about. I'm in a province of British Columbia where my province does a lot on digital responsibility, digital citizenship, social emotional learning, online and offline behaviors. And this should be a requirement for all Ministry of Educations across our country, right?
Well, thank you for that. And, I see Dino, one of my mentors, and also the lead on the advisory, or not the lead, but let's call him a co-lead on the advisory committee for CyberXchange. He made a comment in the main event platform where he basically referring to the point that, even if, our ministries, et cetera, are not taking action, I don't mean that in a negative way, but if it's taking too much time, don't let your education come in the way of your learning. We've got to create groups like Spark Technical Academy here that can ambassador training programs, et cetera, because these are important. Yesterday, I was in a conversation with Minister Rod Phillips, the Minister of Finance, Mayor Sean Collier, and MPP Khalid Rashid, and we were talking about this aspect of we've all jumped, right into the deep end of digital engagement now amidst the pandemic. And in the meanwhile, we've been talking about a slow and steady framework of reopening. Yes, we're talking about physical health and going slow and steady, but when it comes to our digital health, we've just jumped right in and not even thought about it. So I see a lot of questions again coming in, and there are two sort of strands that
Can I just
say?
Yeah,
absolutely, Sandra. Go ahead.
So while Carol was talking, I just wanted to talk about the recommendations that the committee made, and we recommended that the federal government explore the possibility of working with the provinces and territories to establish a task force whose terms of reference would be to define cyberbullying and to establish a uniform manner of monitoring it nationally. And then we also said that the committee recommends the federal government work with the provinces to support long-time research initiatives to enhance our understanding of cyberbullying. So we did do these recommendations that, we need a uniform policy. And the one thing we found out is that countries like New Zealand and Australia were way ahead of us in dealing with this, the cyberbullying. So again, I need to go back and look at it. It's just that as a senator, I wear so many hats, and I'm going to be, once Parliament resumes, I'm going to be the new chair of the Human Rights Committee. And hopefully, that will give me the opportunity to go back and look at this, because, we get involved in, like we did this study on the refugees. We did a study on so many other things. We just finished a study, a 2-year study on the prison system and the human rights of prisoners. And you kind of, some things sort of go, they're at the back of your mind. I'm aware of it, but there's just so much time for me to talk about it. So again, thank you. This is an issue I'm going to bring up again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Carol.
One more. I just wanted to tell Senator Selma that the CSA has just done a proposal and a research study on online digital behaviors with our youth. And they, I think they are presenting or have presented it to someone in the government so that something can be done nationally regarding the digital life of kids in Canada. So I can send you a copy of that later if you're interested.
I would like that. Thank you.
And Carol, if you can share it with all of us, I'll make sure that it gets shared to all the attendees. We have close to about 100 folks coming in from different channels here to the event.
Sure.
Okay. So like I was saying, Senator Salma, thank you for that point. With the questions that I'm getting, there are sort of two strands that I'm seeing. One is obviously on the action piece on what can we do, etc. But the other is that I'm getting requests to sort of jump into the aspect of criminality and unpack that a little bit more. A comment that I've got here is someone just made a comment saying, I've watched various shows that go and catch predators and go and catch people doing these actions and they shame them, etc. But that's not all. There's a lot more than that. And Carol, the question that is coming to you, and it's a slightly sensitive one, so if you're not comfortable, please flag it for me. What drives someone to victimize someone online? Let's put ourselves in the minds of that hacker. Carol?
I always say everyone has a story behind them, right? And so it's the empowerment, it's the power that they feel in victimizing someone else. And I sort of learned more of this. So we know that Amanda had an online predator, right? In addition to peer-to-peer cyber abuse that was going on. And so her online predator didn't live in Canada. He lives in, he originated from Amsterdam. So he is now in a Dutch prison because after Amanda passed away, died by suicide, it was found out that he had also victimized other young people the same way he had victimized Amanda. And I truly believe that if Amanda knew that she wasn't alone in all this, she might have survived what she was going through. And so I went to Amsterdam to I wanted to see this man. And it's funny, he is supposed to come to Canada because there's been charges laid against him again for Amanda's case. And this has never happened before, where you have a young girl who is no longer living, and his predator's been charged, but the predator lives overseas, so it's international, and all the extradition papers have been signed, so he was supposed to come here for trial against Amanda's case in 2020. Now with COVID, we have a problem, right? So anyways, in 2017, I went over there and I sat in the trial with him and against other victims, and I listened to his background story as told by his defense attorneys. And in no way do I condone what he does, what he did, his behaviors. But I also, as an educator, I heard the other side of it. I heard the stuff that happened as he was growing up, his family situation. And then when you move it to somewhere else, everybody's got a story, and every story affects you internally, whether it makes you a more kind and caring person, or whether it makes you someone who has to turn to victimizing others to create your own empowerment, right? We don't know the in-depths of what goes on in people's heads if they don't share it, which is why I truly appreciate when research studies are done with the criminality, the prison system, the individuals in the prison system, because I think you have to find the problem before you can find solutions. And if the problem is socioeconomic based, is it child abuse that was, someone had growing up, those are the things people need to know how to fix it. By just saying to someone, you can't cyberbully, you can't go online and say these things because you're not supposed to. It doesn't work. We have to put that that emotional learning into people in order to make them realize the good in life, right? Everybody has a sense of purpose. Make it a good purpose.
Can I jump
Yes,
in here?
absolutely, Salma, please.
Carol raises a very important point. We talk about everything else. There's still a stigma attached to mental health. And as an immigrant, I find more so amongst us. It's almost as though there's something to be ashamed of. And the conversations that we should be having are not taking place. Even as governments, a lot of money is spent on everything. Mental health is still an issue that nobody, I shouldn't say nobody really looks at. We are looking at it. We are aware of it. And I mean, even just from my time and being in the Senate, the conversations that are taking place now weren't taking place when I joined 10 years ago. So the awareness is there, but there's somehow the stigma, the shame that is attached to mental health issues continues to exist.
Thank you, Senator Salma. Thank you, Carol. I mean, I'm reminded of the line, right? That if we have no peace, it's because we've forgotten that we belong to each other. And Carol, I'm getting a lot of comments right now, and same for you, Senator Salma. Thank you for not just looking at it from one side of the table, but looking at it from every side of the table. And Carol, for you particularly, how difficult that must be is I'm usually pretty nimble in my moderation, and I think I can hold it down, but this has been hard. So Carol, thank you for always jumping in. Go ahead, Carol.
One of the ironic things about my daughter's death and her short life is all the things that affected her, all the things that she experienced. We talk about the peer-to-peer bullying, the cyberbullying, the cyber violence, the online predator, the sexploitation. And I truly admit, I believe you can tell your story. And I can truly say that our home was a bit dysfunctional when my children's father and I split up. So that added to her mental health and her anxiety. So she had layers and layers of it. And it's only until we see those layers that we can talk about it. And I also admit my faults. I admit my faults, like we talk about mental health, right? I was afraid to say to my daughter, how are you feeling? Are you safe today? Mm-hmm. Until it was too late. And so that's why I encourage, and that's why in memory of Amanda, is I go out there and I say, we need to speak our truths. We need to not be afraid of our words. And the words we can sort of qualify, right? And the other weird thing is the date my daughter died is October 10th. And October 10th is World Mental Health Day globally, right? And so the Legacy has created that campaign in memory of Amanda for lighting up as many things in the world purple, so that we can remember Amanda, but we can also talk about mental health. And so back in 2012, when my daughter was alive, no one was talking about mental health. It was buried. It was so deep. No one really. We've come a long way in 8 years. Still not far enough. It's going to take many, many more years. But at least now we're talking about mental health. Less people are afraid to. We are out there. You see it on billboards. When I was in the Los Angeles airport last fall, I was amazed to see the billboard banners in the terminal talk about mental health. And we weren't there 8 years ago. So We talk about the baby steps, and those baby steps are so good.
Thank you, Carol. Senator Salma, I wanna come back to you with a point that Carol talked about, which is how far we've come, not far enough. What's going to get us to be where we need to be?
I think all of us talking about it, we all struggle, and there's nothing unique about it. And to let young people know, to let adults know that we all have issues. We all, first of all, I have to say, Carol, I am so humbled to be sharing, this screen time with you. And one day when we meet, I will tell you what happened, when Amanda died, how it impacted us, those of us on the Human Rights Committee, because it was an issue that we were looking at. And it brought it home, how difficult it must have been for you. As a parent, I mean, I can't even imagine what you want to. So love and respect from me. But I am always willing to talk about mental health. I'm always willing to talk about being bullied. I'm always, threats that come at you for no other reason. We have become, I guess we all have our silos that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And more so the people who do a lot of the bullying, you're sort of nameless, you're sitting in basements. And the people that you talk to, it's different. Some of the stuff that is said to me, I can't imagine anyone coming and saying it to me face to face. Somehow we've lost a little bit of the human touch, the humanity that was there within relationships. But, mental health issues, we need to talk. We talk about them in the Senate. We have people who are willing to stand up and who say, listen, this is an issue we have. So the more we keep the conversation going, the more we keep the focus going on this, and the more we let young people know that there is no shame in talking about mental health. You wouldn't, if you had an infection of any kind, you wouldn't be ashamed to talk about it. Or if you had an injury, you wouldn't talk about it. So the idea that mental health is an illness, for a long time, it hasn't been recognized as that. And we have to, it's very hard to make children feel safe enough to come and open up themselves to you. I found that during our study, for the first time in the history of the Senate of Canada, we brought young people to talk to them, and we spoke to them without any of the staff. They had parents there just to talk to them and see, how bullying has impacted their lives. And some of the stories that I heard even surprised me. So it's conversations, it's talking about it, it's an issue, and it's not going away. If anything, it gets worse. Everyone needs to be looking at it, including government, and maybe putting more funds into it, the mental health issues.
Yeah. Carol, I know you want to respond to that, and please do. And I know we have about 15 minutes. What I can tell you is that there are quite a few questions. So while you respond to that, Carol, if I may also ask you, and follow up by Senator Salma as well. Farouk Nair just messaged me and said, hey, Ali, it's more than just hackers online doing, these activities of violence against women. These are cyber criminals. A couple of questions have come in around we've spoken about how we identified. So for those of you who didn't attend the opening, we spoke about how we identify that, and you can see the recording. But a question that's come in, which I think is very pertinent, is that are there cyber gangs that do this? We've spoken about individuals. Carol and Salma, could you talk a little bit about gangs who do this for monetary profit, and what kind of a system and industry is behind this in the event that someone's story is not just that individual odd case? Carol?
Think about a cave of trolls. And so we have digital trolls online. It's like the gaming community has their groups, right? There are those communities of trollers who go out there and specifically target people, and that's their thing. And they'll do it in groups, and they'll and just like predators, they work in groups too, right? And they trade images and videos. They have their own online world out there in the dark web. And so and as a group, so I don't have to explain this somehow. As a single person finds it very hard to go up to someone face to face and cyber abuse them, to bully them, right? But if you've got that single person and you've got a whole group behind you cheering you on, you are more likely to do those negative behaviors and feel joy. Your endorphins start to rise because you've got a whole group of people cheering you on. And that's the same as the cyber world. I think we often think of the digital world and the non-digital world as totally different. But what the digital world is just the word digital put into the non-digital world. It works exactly the same thing, except it's more easy and it's more fluid to abuse someone using technology, because you don't have to be there face to face. You don't have to see them on a screen. It's harder on Zoom because you can see me, so I wouldn't tell you that I really hate your hair today, right? Because you can see me, but if you couldn't see me and I couldn't see you, so much, because they are just words. And that's where we have to teach people about how words can hurt, right? It's a job. It's something that you won't catch everybody, because we still have people in the prison systems. You won't catch everybody, but if you can catch the majority, and if you can catch those people that stand in the middle. So if you think of 100 people and you have 10 victims, 10, what do I call those other 10? The guilty party, the bulliers, the cyberbullies, the harassers, the abusers on this end. So you've got 10 and 10, that's 20. You've still got 80 people in the middle. We have to converse, and we have to talk, and we have to teach those 80 people, the bystanders in the middle, to speak up, to support, to speak up for the targeted people, to speak up to the people who are being the abusers and say, knock it off, stop, right? But the power is in those 80 people in the middle.
Thank you, Carol. Senator Salma, picking up from where Carol left off, right, is talk a little bit about what maybe even in your analysis and studies, what have you seen as some of the motivators and the groups and gangs that are infiltrating such cyber crimes against vulnerable groups online?
Like Carol said, it's being faceless. So it's very easy to sit in your basement in front of the computer and pass comments on people, be hurtful. I don't think it registers that you're really hurting someone. And being, in the public domain, like I've kind of developed a slightly thick skin, but I still get hurt by certain comments that come at me. And they are gangs. I mean, we've seen predators who prey on children, sharing images throughout the world. And, law sort of enforcement, like our police, they're there. They're constantly trying to, sort of catch these people, but they seem to stay one step ahead. And, just to give you a figure that, in this, we're talking 2011 and 12, 200, and I was just looking at my notes, 282,000 incidents of bullying every month in high schools. I mean, and that was 2011, 2012. So think of the lives that are being impacted. And these things, these are young developing minds, they're forever changed by bullying. So you've got, even me, as I'm a conservative senator, and the minute I put out something which I believe is right, I look at the comments, and a lot of it will be, some will be the same people. They don't like me because I'm Salma, they dislike me because I'm a conservative senator, Salma. People have stopped being kind to each other. And I remember when I would, most of my origin is, I'm from Pakistan, northern Pakistan, and when I take my children back, the teachers would say, we're not going to give them homework because they'd be missing a bit of school. Take them into the school and let them attend school there for a week or so. And I did that with my older child, and she came back and she said, Ma, I'm really surprised every time the teacher walks in. She says the children stand up and greet her. And if one of the children didn't have something, everybody was willing to share. She spoke of how when she was doing some work in Masai Mara, and she said the incidents of 3 siblings sharing one pencil. I think somehow we in developed nations, we have lost that human touch a little bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I'm not being offensive. I'm just saying the way it is. you know, and that kindness. But I'm seeing that it's changed in Pakistan. There's recently been incidents. It's changed elsewhere in the world. Everyone's catching up. It's funny because you pick up the bad stuff more quickly than you do the good stuff. I mean, the developed nations have so much, you know, I mean, the way we volunteer, the way we donate, you know, how we reach out and help people, those things have a slower pace to reach to the developing nations. But things like hurting each other, cyberbullying, you know, being cruel to each other, has a faster route.
You know, Carol just put a very powerful line there, just saying, you know, it's sad that kindness and caring needs to be taught. And Carol, the fact that, you know, you're engaging in this conversation, you know, mental toughness and strength is when you can find fuel in an empty tank. And, you know, you've found strength in many areas. And I want to take off with what with Senator Salma said and just morph it a little bit more. She mentioned the important aspect of Pakistan. And I'm getting some questions about, can you help us understand the world of cyberbullying and tech-facilitated violence against women, specifically from a global perspective, but also acutely how it impacts our immigrant community and our indigenous community?
I think that, as we know, technology has no barriers, has no borders, has no walls. And so it's globally rampant out there. We have other countries, of course, who have major technology wall blockages, whatever you call them, right? And so information doesn't get out of a country or information doesn't come in. It would be interesting to see what the rate of cyber abuse is in those countries. The behaviors affect us all. There are no walls, there are no boundaries. If you go into, like, Vancouver is a very diverse city. And so when you walk around and you go into the different communities, everyone has a tech device on them, right? And so teaching about, you know, emotional caring is global. Teaching about the safety and digital wellness is global. What we do have are the racial lines that people cross, that people feel that it is their right to verbally abuse, cyber harass, cyber abuse people who have different skin color, different hair color, or, you know, speak a different language. And we always go back to that kindness and caring. We have to teach people that we are all equal, that we are all put on this earth and we have a job to do. And it's not about race, it's not about language, it's not about all those things. And so the haters, we need to overpower the haters by being the group that knows the kindness and the caring. I have to keep coming back to that because that's what's going to drive a difference. Kindness and caring is going to drive that difference in mental health too, and make people support each other, make people more knowledgeable and help and not be afraid. Because a lot of times when kids are bullied or cyberbullied, someone won't help them because they're afraid to be the next victim.
Thank you. You know, we've got about 5 more minutes, and I just want to, you know, taking sort of borrowing from your strain of thought. You know, I want to acknowledge quite a few of the folks who are here. Lisa House, Town of Ajax, Jody Swain, Hire and Fire Your Kids. A lot of folks who are here who have taken the time, and I really want to commend all of you. I know it's a working day, and you folks have taken the time. Thank you. But there's someone also that I want to do a little shout out to, and that's Professor Myra Bauman. And you know, she was one of my first year educators in my university years, and she was the one who alerted me to certain conditions. And her educational ethos was very strong. She got me the book called Missing Sarah. And if anybody, you know, has not sort of been exposed to what's happening to our indigenous communities, what's happening to our immigrant communities online, read the book Missing Sarah. I still remember it was my first year in university. It was the elective course that I had to do. It was a winter course. You know, I was born with this masculinity growing up in Dubai, etc. That was the first book that ever made me cry. And I think it's an important read if all of this conversation is new to you. Let's take the next 4 minutes to get some closing comments. Senator Salma, from your end, there's a lot of ask here about how can we help you in the work that you're doing, Senator. Can you give us some perspective on that for the next 2 minutes?
Well, what I would like to say is that we need to recognize that language is critical. And, you know, there was an old saying where sticks and stones will hurt my bones, but words will not. Well, that's wrong. Words can have deep impact. And what we found in our study is that it scars young minds. And, you know, how you can help us is this: there any issue that you see? I'm a public servant. Please email me. I make sure I answer all my emails. If you want a phone call, I answer all the phone calls. And it's a conversation we need to have. And Carol, I thank you for taking this torch forward. You have continued to work where some of us get caught up in other things, you know, just so because our lives are such and the work that we do. And I've also been on our Aboriginal committee. So there's issues there too. I mean, you know, this is a conversation we could have for 2-3 hours.
I know.
So much, there's so much there. But, you know, let's be a little bit kind to each other. But for parents, have conversations with your children. You know, I have one TV in my house, which is in the family room. When my children were younger, I didn't like them shutting the door to their rooms. I wanted to come in, and especially when their friends were there. I'd say, I want the door open. I want to know what's happening. What are you talking about? But I was never judgmental though, because I found that if I was judgmental, I got their back up against the wall. You know, throw the question at them. So-and-so said this to this friend of yours. What do you think? Was that right? It's conversations we need to have. It's a conversation which I feel we should be having in classrooms, where the educators should be maybe once a week, take 45 minutes and talk about this in the classroom. Because remember, the teachers are in a position where they can really, really mold young minds. It's talking about it, raising the issue. You know, if you see it, call it out. You also found in our study that those people who witnessed, you know, the bullying, it impacted them also. It affected them also. So let's talk about it. Let's have a national conversation. And, you know, be aware your words hurt.
Carol, I'll give you a minute to just provide a closing comment before I summarize our conversation. Carol?
Only a minute? I could talk forever. I truly believe that you know, we have, as an educator, we do have that captive audience of our kids in our classroom. And yes, we need to talk about the digital wellness of each person's life and their responsibility as an individual as they grow up, because you know what, these kids are going to be our future leaders, or in economic growth or whatever. So it's really important to talk to our young people. For the adults, whether you're a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a godparent, a grandparent, or whatever, it's to keep up with their knowledge. And how do you do that? Because there's so much out there on the internet. And that's why I've gone to, you know, certain, if you sign up for newsletters, Media Smarts or Common Sense Media or Google alerts on certain topics and conversations, and then you can see what's happening globally around the world. And it gets your mind thinking. You may not be an advocate and you may not have the answers, but if you can create that knowledge bank in your head, your brain is always processing on what you could do better, or that conversation you're going to have with someone at Tim Hortons, not about the colors of spring flowers, but maybe of something on, you know, you've seen in the news and the rate of cyber abuse out there. We need to be proactive as a society and step up and do something, because it's affecting our kids, and our kids are our future. And if we don't educate our kids and they can't be productive citizens, then when we grow old as seniors, there's not going to be that cohesive world out there that we can live in. So it's our responsibility now to do what we can.
Thank you, Carol. I see more folks even from government here. Councillor Crawford is on as well, so thank you. And I've seen your questions. I'll try and we'll probably have another session in the future. I see Keith Baumgren from SANS, a major technical institute. I see Kevin Crada, some really good people doing some amazing things. Thank you for taking the time today. I just want to wrap up the conversation in a minute by saying, you know, we've had a lot of discussions, a lot of different topics we've covered. And I think one that I really wanted to get to was, these aspects on what are the topics and facets that cyberbullies and cybercriminals pick up on, whether it's race, sexuality, gender. And now amidst COVID-19, there's a lot of things around ethnic backgrounds that are starting to take forward as well. But I'm glad that we opened our eyes and we looked at these conversations, became comfortable with being uncomfortable. So thank you all for that. Two real quick observations. You both noticed that behind Senator Salma and as well as behind Carol, there's some pieces of artwork. I know with Carol, these are artworks from her children in some cases, and Senator Salma, that's her own artwork there. I'm not going to delve in too much into the context of, I'm not an art historian by any stretch of imagination, but I will tell you creativity takes courage. And if there's anything you can take from that background is we need to find creative ways to have this conversation, and it will take courage to do this. So be inspired by that. And Carol, on behalf of the CyberXchange Advisory Committee, on behalf of Medha, Saraiya, who put this session together, Farouk Nair, Zainab, who all got everything in place. You know, they say, let go of the thoughts that don't make you strong. It's very clear that the thought of Amanda has made you strong and makes you stronger every day, and you will never let go of that thought. And from us, we too are saying that we will never let go of that thought, growing stronger with you at all times. Please reach out to us if we can do anything for you. With that, I thank Senator Salma, I thank Carol Todd, with the promise that you will be hearing from us next week about an initiative from the advisory committee, which includes some very strong folks on what we can do to support. I wish you all a wonderful day, and I thank you all again for your time. There are a whole bunch of sessions kicking off in 5 minutes. I have to go and moderate another one, so I will step out. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of CyberXchange. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.